to what I was telling you there about what's happening recently, or even today, as this signing ceremony is taking place. There's been an attack in Zaporizhia. That's one of the areas that is expected to be annexed by Russia, killing 23 people and injuring more. What are expected to have been civilians in that attack. So Ukrainian authorities are saying that Russia struck a civilian convoy. Russia has yet to comment on that particular event that happened today. And it's also important to note that these regions aren't entirely controlled by Russia. So what they're annexing is, at this point, we don't know if they're drawing a line around the areas that they control or not in the annexation of these areas. And this signing ceremony is afterwards is expected to be a pop concert coming afterwards in celebration of these annexed areas. Now, these are members of the Russian parliament, obviously waiting in anticipation of what the Russian president is going to say ahead of signing the documents for this annexation. So, if you're just joining us, we're in the Juragevsky Hall of the Grand Kremlin Palace, and we're waiting for a statement from Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's expected to officially announce the annexation of the Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk regions in Ukraine after. Over the weekend and last week, they had so-called referendums, and people in those areas were expected to vote on whether they wanted to join Russia. This has obviously been strongly condemned by the West, who have called these referendums illegal. Sham referendums, and obviously by the Ukrainian president himself, is strongly condemning that too. Vladimir Zelensky, that is, saying that there will be harsh repercussions for these referendums and what we expect now to be the annexation of those areas into Russia. With Crimea and these other areas annexed, that would make up around 15% of Ukrainian territory, which they're saying is the biggest territorial grab in this region since World War II. Obviously, the American President Joe Biden said earlier on in regards to these referendums and the potential annexation, of course, of these regions, that they would never be accepted and not recognized by the international community. And of course, Crimea in 2014, that was only recognized by a handful of countries, including Afghanistan, Syria, and North Korea. That obviously 2014 still remains in the collective memory, and Western countries have said that they will not recognise this annexation of further areas either. The EU is talking about a new wave of sanctions in response to these annexations. And indeed, energy ministers were meeting today to discuss the crisis. in Moscow. And we are expecting to hear a statement from Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is officially going to announce the annexation of 4 regions in Ukraine. That's Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk. Strong condemnation has come from Western countries and Ukrainian allies. They've called what Russia were calling referendums. They've called them sham referendums in these areas, saying that it's impossible to hold democratic elections during in conflict zones. Also expected after the statement is a celebratory pop concert outside the Kremlin walls on Red Square. So that is expected after his announcement. Again, very reminiscent of the announcement made after the so-called referendums held in Crimea in 2014. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to note that not all of these regions are fully held by Russia at this point during the conflict. And last week, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered mass mobilization of reservist forces to join in the effort of this war. It's expected to be 30,000 reservist soldiers from the Russian side are expected to now go to Ukraine to bolster the Russian forces there. Now this comes after several big losses and gains by the Ukrainian army in the south and indeed the east. And there's been mixed feelings in regards to this mass mobilization that Putin ordered, and there have been scenes at the borders of men of fighting age trying to leave the country, but at the same time there's also been protests over the weekend of people against this mobilization, and some fear in that regard. Having said that, the Russian Military of Defense, the MOD, has showed footage of soldiers volunteering from the reservist forces to go to Ukraine. So mixed messages there from what we can see on the borders and protests, but also many Russian men saying they are ready to fight. Now, if you're just joining us, let me remind you that we are covering a live broadcast, a live statement from Russian President Vladimir Putin, who should be on shortly. He is expected to announce the annexation of over 64,000 kilometers of Ukraine. That's the regions of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk. And he's going to be addressing that to Russian parliament and the heads of these so-called breakaway regions. So it's important to note that today in Zaporizhia, Ukrainian authorities are saying that there was a Russian strike on a civilian convoy that has killed 23 people and injured more. The Ukrainian authorities are blaming the Russian side for that. Russia has yet to make any comment. Zaporizhia, the region, is one of the regions that held a so-called referendum on the annexation to Russia. As I mentioned earlier, it's one of the regions that isn't fully controlled by Russia at this stage. So it's unclear how this annexation, this so-called annexation, will work, and what parts of these regions are expected to be part of the annexation, etc. So shortly we will be hearing from the Russian president, and maybe he will address that issue. So if you're just joining us now, you're watching Euronews, and we are currently live in Moscow for the statement by the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who's expected to officially announce the annexation of several Ukrainian regions. What the images that you can see right now is the Georgievsky Hall of the Grand Kremlin Palace, quite a ceremonial looking building, impressive looking building, and there are members of the so-called breakaway regions with their Moscow appointed heads that are there for a signing ceremony, which is expected to take place after the Russian president addresses the people here about the annexation process. There has been strong condemnation from the West, from Ukraine's allies, about the so-called referendums that were held. Difficult to hold a democratic process within conflict zones. They're calling the referendums illegal and that they don't have any value because the situation that the people are living in these areas. The EU is looking at another wave of sanctions to put on Russia in regards to what they're calling these this illegal annexation and these illegal referendums. And these annexations are somewhat reminiscent of what happened in 2014 in Crimea, where almost a very similar situation occurred when Russia annexed that part of Ukraine. So hello and welcome to Euronews. If you are just joining us, we are waiting for the Russian president to make a statement to this hall that's called the Georgievsky Hall of the Grand Kremlin Palace, about the potential annexation of the regions of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk in Ukraine. The Russian president will be addressing the heads of the so-called breakaway regions of Ukraine, who are there to sign official paperwork for the annexation, and also members of the Russian parliament. Earlier last week, there was an announcement made by Russian President Vladimir Putin. It was an order for mobilization of over 300,000 reservist soldiers, asking them to sign up to help in what the Kremlin still calls its military operation in Ukraine. The move is expected to bolster Russian forces in Ukraine after they recently suffered heavy losses and retreated in many areas within the south and the east. Why annex these areas now? There's some speculation that by annexing up, I think now we have the Russian president coming, so let's hear what he has to say.
Благодарю вас, пожалуйста. Прошу. Прошу вас. Уважаемые граждане России, граждане Донецкой и Луганской народных республик, жители Запорожской и Херсонской областей, депутаты Государственной Думы, Сената.
Zaporizhia and Kherson, parliamentaries and senators of the Russian Federation, you already know that the Donetsk, Luhansk republics and Zaporizhia and Kherson had the referendums on the weekend, and we already know the results of these referendums. People have made their choice. It is a choice, it's a clear choice. Today, we are accepting the entry of the Republic of Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. I am sure that the Assembly of the Duma will accept these 4 different regions as new subjects to the Russian Federation, because this is the will of millions of people. And of course, this is their right. This is the right that no one can take away from them, which is written in the first article of the Organization of the United Nations. We are talking about auto-determination of people. We are repeating, I am repeating that no one can take away this right from these people. And this is why our older generations, this is what our older generations have fought for. And this is also why they have created a new Russia. And they have thought in Nomov, and they are our big brothers, our fathers. And they fought until their death during the Second World War. We will never forget. We will never forget the heroes of Russia who did not agree with the neo-Nazi push in Ukraine, who wanted to reserve their traditions and fight for their rights. These are the fighters of the Donbass in Kharkiv, in Donbass. These are peaceful people. These are women, old people, Ukrainians, Russians, of every nationality. These are the real leaders like the leader of Donetsk, like Olga Kachura, and many others. It's the prosecutor of the Republic of Luhansk. This is for all of our soldiers and officers who have fallen during this special operation in Ukraine. They are our heroes. They are heroes of a big Russia. And I please ask you to commemorate their sacrifice with a minute of silence.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
За выбором миллионов жителей в Донецкой и Луганской народных республиках.
The choice of millions of inhabitants of the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson
Эту духовную связь люди передавали своим детям и внукам.
Part of history. It is our history. This link that we have with them has been given from father to son, and apart from all the difficulties we have faced, nobody can destroy this feeling that we have, the feeling that they have of love with Russia. This is why the people that have been born there after the explosion of the USSR have fought for the reunification. This since 1991. The leaders of different parties have never been asked to join Russia again, and now they had this opportunity. This became the 1991 explosion of the Federation of Russia, became one of the biggest tragedies of the Russian Federation. They decided to cut different regions at different borders, and this is how all leaders from the USSR have been able to dissect our country. I can think that maybe they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know the consequences that these actions had and have in the future. There is no more Soviet Union. We cannot rewrite the past, and we do not want that. There is nothing stronger than our determination to reunify our people, which is the same people who consider themselves as part of Russia. Our ancestors have been living under the same country. There is nothing bigger than the determination of these people. Their determination to come back into their home country. During 8 years, people in the Donbass have undergone a genocide. They were bombed, and people in Zaporizhia have tried to put these people against the Russian regime. They have been threatened with death multiple times. Teachers, citizens of these territories, and people in Zaporizhia and Kherson have spoken their words, their will. And I want the power of Kyiv to listen to me right now, and that their Western partners and neighbors listen to me as well. I want them to know that the citizens of these regions have become Russian citizens forever, and we will protect them.
Мы призываем киевский режим немедленно прекратить огонь.
We are calling the Kyiv regime to stop right now every military action and end this war that they started in 2014, and for them to come back to the negotiating table. We are ready. But the choice of the Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson will not be on the table. Russia will not betray them. They will remain Russian. And today, the power of Kyiv needs to to acknowledge that they have made a choice, a free choice. And this is the only way towards peace. We will defend our lands with every means possible, with every means necessary, with all our strength. We will ensure that these citizens have a peaceful life. This is our mission. This is our liberating mission for our country. We will build back every city that has been destroyed, every school, every infrastructure. We will bring back the social system and medical systems. We will also work to ensure peace and security for every Russian citizen, for all of these autonomous regions of our country.
Уважаемые друзья, коллеги,
dear friends, colleagues, today I want to also talk to the officers and soldiers who are currently on the ground, of the Donbass soldiers who, after this partial mobilization, have fulfilled their duty to defend their country, to respond to the mobilization. I want to tell their families why we are fighting, what type of enemy we have in front of us, who is taking benefit from this bloody war. This is a part of our people that are there. They have seen our soldiers. Our soldiers have seen what the leaders of Ukraine and Western neighbors have been able to do when they took off their masks and showed their real faces. After the Soviet Union exploded, everybody needed to accept the Ukraine's will. And everybody thought in the Western world that Russia would not be able to be able to stand up for itself after that. And this almost happens. We remember the 90s, but Russia remains strong, and now Russia has become strong again. But the Western world is trying to hit back at us, to destroy us. And this is the dream of the Western world. They wanted to put the different civilizations, the different peoples of our nation against each other. They cannot sleep safely at night. Especially when they know that people are actually wanting to fight for a common history, for common values. So the Western leaders are trying to make everything possible in their hands to try to push for dollars and to make more profits in our regions, to ensure that they will have a better life in the future. But I want to reassure everybody that it's in their interest that different countries in Eastern Europe have it's important that Eastern countries are trying to become independent from the dollars, and they're trying to undermine this so-called peace process. That's why some nations are becoming more bowing towards the UN, and some countries are being taken by force. And if we cannot succeed, and if they cannot succeed, then they will try and destroy every country that doesn't bow down to the UN. There are millions of human destinies that are being broken. There's being a creation of new colonies, new protected countries, just so that they can make profits. I want to repeat, they are greedy, and this is the base of this war that's ongoing right now in Russia. The Western world does not want us to be free. They do not want us to be equal partners.
Для них прямая угроза.
They want to become our masters. They are threatening
Поэтому покушаются наших философов. Наша
for
культура
them.
для них
They're threatening our philosophies and our thoughts.
Наше развитие и процветание тоже.
They fear that we are against what they want.
Не нужна Россия.
They do not like our
Она
philosophers
нужна нам.
because our philosophers are against them. But we do not need them, but they need our Russia, and we need our Russia.
Хочу напомнить, что претензии на мировое господство
I want to recall
и стойкость нашего народа.
that all
Россия всегда будет Россией. Мы и
pretensions
сейчас защитим и наши ценности, и наш народ.
and
Запад рассчитывает на
all-
безнаказанность, на то,
and
что
today too we will defend our values.
собственно говоря, все
The
исходя.
Western world claims that they can do anything,
Соглашения в сфере
and until then it was true that they were able to do most things
договоренности, достигнутые на самом высоком политическом уровне,
with all of our partnerships created.
твердое обещание не
But all of our
расширять
partnerships that are created have been thrown into the garbage. All of our
руководители обернулись грязным
all of their promises of not enlarging NATO have been thrown into the garbage.
одностороннем порядке под надуманным.
They have turned their promises into lies,
Только и слышим со всех сторон.
into
Запад
dirty lies.
отстаивает порядок, основанный
They have broken every accord, every partnership.
кто вообще
And we can only remember that the Western neighbors are protecting the world order. But where do these laws come from? Who enacted these laws? These are lies. Everybody, everywhere there are these lies because there are double standards. These double standards can only stand for stupid people. Russia has been standing for a million years, and Russia will not follow these stupid laws.
Именно так называемый Запад растоптал принцип нерушимости границ.
This is the Western world that has stampeded the principles of all their security, and now they are deciding themselves who cannot decide to determine politically determine themselves. Who gave the Western world the power to decide? And this is why they are so angry against us. When they see the people of Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson deciding for themselves, these people have no rights. And Western elites are refusing the sovereignty and the international law when it comes to the people's determination. They're talking about apartheid. They're trying to divide people. On one side is their vessels, and on the other side, it's this civilized world. They are accusing every person and entire countries, and nothing is new in that. Western elites have always been the same. They are the colonizers. We will never accept this type of racism and the Russophobia that is right now presenting itself all across the globe. A racism that has become acceptable. Neoliberal thoughts. Are neoliberal thoughts the only way? It's even hard to say. But their own crimes that the Western world has been committing is trying to divert the responsibility. For example, when the Western world tried to colonize the third world countries, this since the Middle Ages, and then the Indian genocide and slavery. And then the French Anglo war against China. They have given drugs to these countries, and they were the real colonizers at that time.
Мы гордимся тем, что в 20 веке именно наша страна возглавила антиколониальное движение, которое открыло многим народам мира возможности для развития.
That during the 20th century, it is our country that opened the path towards freedom and liberation.
Подчеркну, что одна из причин многовекового нескрываемой злобы этих западных элит
to fight against poverty. And this is why the Western elites are so angry against us, because we did not let them, we did not let these values corrupt us, and we did not let our country become colonizers. We have talked with these countries as equals, and this is how we created in Russia a country that is founded on good traditions, on Judaism, on Islam, and Orthodoxy, and on the Russian language. We know that many times there has been interventions against Russia in the 17th and 18th centuries, and after the October Revolution, but the Western world has never been able to take any of Russia's lands. They were calling us partners, but they were considering us as unequal partners. And now these different regions of Luhansk, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia, Kherson, are being reassured by the Union. Thank you. Western neighbors have been telling other countries and other people that they will bring democracy and freedom, but this is just the opposite of what they're doing. They've been exploiting instead of giving freedom. It's slavery, it's violence that they have been providing. They want to create a unipolar world. It's a world full of lies, full of hypocrisy, and it is the United States that has used their nuclear capacity twice in the cities of Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan. I want to remind you that Americans and the British have bombed Dresden, Cologne, and other cities, other German cities, and there was no need for that. Their only goal was was just like the bombing in Japan, to demoralize and spread fear in their countries and in the whole world. The US has left the US has left us scary signs in the world, and in Korea they are currently.
Интересно, что это за союзничество такое? Но весь мир же знает, что за руководителями этих стран следят.
What is the price of these partnerships? We know that the leaders of South Korea are being spied upon, that we hear their conversations in their houses, on their phones. This is a real shame on who is doing this. And this is just like slaves. They are just behaving like slaves to the US. They are calling for solidarity with NATO. But it's really a one-sided partnership from the US towards the rest of the world. It is their politics that have created millions to try to flee devastated lands in third world countries, trying to flee to Europe. Now they want. Well, I would like to ask a question. Where is the grain from in Ukraine going to? It is going to European countries. Only 5% has been going to poor countries, and again. This is the Western lies. US elites are using the tragedies of these people to to destroy these countries, to weaken the states. It also concerns Europe, like France and Spain. All the other countries are asking for more and more sanctions against Russia, and a lot of European leaders are accepting these sanctions. They understand that the US wants Europe to refuse Russian gas, so that Europe will be merciful towards the US. And European leaders understand that very well, but they would rather serve the US's interests. And this is a real betrayal of their own people. But this is their problem. This does not concern us, but these sanctions are not enough for them. They've been trying to divert with these, to divert the real problems that they have, that have started to explode with Nord Stream 1 pipelines. And we know who is profiting from this, from these actions. The US, the US's influence in the world is based on their strength and their military force, even though it is really wrapped and hidden in a big smile. In the whole world, they have hundreds of military bases. They have expanded NATO, and they are trying to expand on their military capacities in the whole world. For example, in Tokyo, and every country that are trying to get their own sovereignty are becoming direct enemies of the US. And on this principle is based the military doctrine of the US and NATO, who is asking for total domination of the world. And this is hypocrisy. When they are talking about peace and they are trying to leverage what that they're trying to leverage in the world. If you look at the facts, there is a real will to try to destroy the sovereignty in Latin America, in Central Asia, and current US partners. We know very well they put up sanctions against their own partners. They put sanctions against companies. We know that these politics will expand. They are targeting everyone, even though the neighbors, even the independent communities, our neighbors. By putting sanctions against Russia, they thought they would be able to gather everyone, but we know that not everyone is agreed with this. Only political masochists agree with this. The bigger part is against this, and they are choosing a reasonable way of trying to negotiate with Russia. Europe is used to getting everything by threats, and they think that these methods may be able to work, but these methods are methods of the past, and they will realize that. They will realize that they will soon be defeated, because these ideas, these US ideas and position will be their ruin. By using their aggressive propaganda, as we've just talked about, we cannot feed people with bills, with dollar bills. It is impossible to heat up houses with dollar bills. This is very important. You cannot make someone eat paper dollars. You need actual food. You cannot You cannot feed people with lies with this capitalization. This is not possible. You need to heat people with energy, and this is why politicians in Europe are trying to convince their citizens to eat less, to dress with warmer clothes on, so that they feel the cold less. And then they call us the enemies. They put all the responsibility of, and the only reason the only reason they have many issues is because of all the Western elites, because they're not willing to try and find real solutions for the current health, food, and energy crisis. They are the only ones responsible. This is not Russia's responsibility. They do not want to face problems that they are being faced with. They do not want to create a federal world. They want to try to use methods that they have been using for years in order to. I state again, it's a contradiction. The Western world is being faced with these contradictions ever since the Second World War. This allowed the U.S. to establish the dollar as the strongest currency in the world. And I would like to remind you of this period, because the Western world was able to fight this crisis by using the means and the consequences of the explosion of the Soviet Union. This was also during the 20th century. It was a problem that they were able to negotiate. But this is how they have also been able to steal resources from the countries that used to be in the Soviet Union. And I have no doubt that they will try to push the system that they have been using for years until it collapses. And then they will try to say that the war will cover everything. But Russia is aware of its own mission, of the U.S. mission, and the U.S. colonizing model. And the master of this concept will try to push this concept until its very end, because they have nothing else to offer. They have nothing else to offer the world except their system of stealing. And they want themselves, and they want to control other people's futures. They are at a point where they do not accept the values of family and religion. I want to come back to. I would like to call every citizen of our country, not only the people in this room, but do we want in our country instead of a mother and a father number one and father number two, father number three? Are we crazy? Do they want us to have in our schools that we have from the very early age that we are talking about sexual relationships, that they are only creating in their heads? In the world, there are people that there is a third sex. Is all this acceptable for our citizens? No. We have our own destiny, and I repeat that the U.S. dictatorship and the Western world is against these values, our values, and against everyone, and even against its own citizens. They are refusing the very concept of the human body. They are bombing the concept of religion. In the Bible, when Jesus is talking of full prophets, they will know them by their fruits. And then now you can see the fruits of these false prophets. And these fruits are not acceptable for many of the people across the world, and also here at home. They are forming the new center of development. They are talking about their own interests, but they are also ready to defend their interests. Many people want to create a unipolar system, but they also want to be more peaceful everywhere in the US, in Europe. Many people are thinking like us. We are seeing their support. In many countries, there are movements, liberal movements, anti-colonizing movements that are being created. And these movements are only bound to expand, and this force will be the future. Will be the future geopolitical reality. Today we are fighting for an equal world. First for Russia, we want for the dictatorship to stay in the past, so that every person on earth understands that the politics, the exclusivity of someone is criminal. We need to shift the balance and turn the page on this dishonorable page of history, and the defeat of the hegemony of the Western world is inevitable. The war ground that we are seeing at the moment is a fight for our people, for Russia, for the history of Russia, for the big and strong Russia.
За большую историческую Россию, за будущие поколения, за наших детей.
For a strong Russia, for a historical Russia, for our future generations, for our friends, for our children, we need to protect, and we need to protect them from these experiments that are being created by the Western world to try to break their souls. They need to know that they cannot take away from us our history, the history of our planet. We need strengthening. We need the strengthening of our people. At the very bottom and at the very base, we need balance, sovereignty, and our values, our love, and our humanity. And I would like to end with the words of a real patriot. If I consider Russia as my country, that is to say that I love like Russia, that I think like Russia, that I sing like Russia. If I think of the strength of the political strength of Russia, of the destiny of the Russian people, these misfortunes are mine. Its happiness is mine too. Beyond these words, it is a choice that many of our ancestors have followed. And today, this choice that we're making for ourselves, and today we are making the Republic of Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson to be their own people, to be their own country, and to live with the destiny of their own country, of their country that is Russia, and to be victorious with Russia. The truth is with us. Russia is with us.
Начинается церемония подписания документов.
The ceremony of the signing of the documents will start. The ceremony. These are the 4 representatives of the regions that are going to be annexed to Russia. So that's the representatives of the regions of Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk.
Президент Российской Федерации Владимир Владимирович Путин, глава Донецкой Народной Республики.
So that's Vladimir Putin there, the president of Russia, signing the annexation documents for the regions of Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk in regions that are in Ukraine. And these are the Moscow-appointed representatives of those regions signing there the annexation to become part of Russia.
И глава Херсонской области Владимир Васильевич Сальдо. Подписывают договоры между Российской Федерацией и Донецкой Народной
They are now ratifying the documents between the Russian Federation and the Donetsk Republic, the Donetsk People's Republic, that is, also between the Russian Federation and the Luhansk People's Republic, the so-called Luhansk People's Republic. Also between the Russian Federation and Zaporizhzhia, the Zaporizhzhia region. And now the last region between Kherson and the Russian Federation.
О принятии в Российскую Федерацию Донецкой Народной Республики.
They've now signed the agreements of these regions and the annexation to the Russian Federation.
Запорожской области.
So if you're just joining us here at Euronews, we are currently watching the signing of the annexation of the regions of Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk in the Ukraine. This is the signing ceremony between the Russian Federation and its President Vladimir Putin, signing the paperwork to annex these regions of Ukraine after so-called referendums last week.
Государственный гимн Российской Федерации.
There is now expected to be a celebratory concert outside the Kremlin on the Red Square. If you're just joining us, you're watching Euronews, and we are watching the live ceremony of the annexation of several regions of Ukraine into the Russian Federation. Here we can see the Moscow-appointed representatives of Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk, and they have just signed the paperwork for annexation to the Russian Federation. Shortly before this, the Russian President Vladimir Putin gave an emotional and strong speech regarding the Western approach to the war in Ukraine, condemning sanctions and condemning what he called the US power over the rest of the world, a unipolar world. That's what he was saying, and that he wanted to change how politics works globally. Stay tuned for more information on Euronews.